Hey, everybody, it's Dr. Kyrin. Welcome back as we dive into talking about the third consequence of hormonal poverty. And we've talked about that I like to call them flex hormones, and it's not just one, and it's not just your sex hormones. You know, hormones are kind of like ants at a picnic, where you see one, there's never just one. There's usually 100 behind them. So hormonal impoverished hormones, when you have health problems, they're like ants at a picnic. There's never just one hormone problem. And, you know, someone will say, well, which hormone is my problem? I want to balance my estrogen. I want to balance, how do I balance this? And that's not an empowered question, because you'll never get where you want to be with that question. So you got to drop back and say, what's the question I need to ask? What are all the things causing me to be hormonally impoverished? So the third consequence is because every cell, every system in your body requires these hormones for proper communication to maintain your metabolism and your health, to do repairs and keep you vitally alive, is a shortened lifespan. And this is something that I don't know why, you know, the mainstream literature is very clear on the fact that when you're in hormonal poverty, your lifespan is generally 1 to 2 years shorter. Now, our lifespan is a lot longer now than it was 100, 200 years ago, because we do have a lot of acute interventions in terms of medicine for catastrophic things like heart attacks and strokes. But I don't know about you, 1 to 2 years on your life, losing that is not something I really want to sign up for. Is that something you want to sign up for? No. If you're like me, you want to be here for as long as you can, enjoying and experiencing the things that you love to be here and enjoy and experience, like being here for your loved ones, right? So I think this is something every woman needs to be aware of. So if you're in hormonal poverty, your lifespan shortens. And the sobering truth is that studies show that when you correct your hormonal poverty, you expand your lifespan. So this is correctable, and we're basically doing nothing about it. And I don't want that to be you. So I want you to be aware of, if you're not addressing the symptoms of midlife metabolic mayhem, all those symptoms pointing to the problem, if you're not addressing your increased risk for disease or the diseases that you have diagnoses for, medications for, that there is this third consequence that you need to be aware of and you need to be addressing. A lot of the data comes from actuarial studies that have been published in prominent journals. And let's see, I can just mention a couple of them. The British Journal of Obstetrics and Gynecology, JAMA, actually published a Trends in Age at Natural Menopause and Reproductive Lifespan Among U.S. Women, 1959 to 2008. And hopefully you're familiar with JAMA, Journal of the American Medical Association. Andrologia published a hormone replacement therapy and longevity studies. Mortality and COVID-19 study published in another family practice journal. There are so many references for all of the things that I've been sharing with you that we have available. But somehow it seems like there's a disconnect, and even the medical literature seems to be like mainstream medicine, and the actual treatment you're getting is about 30 or more years behind. So it hasn't made it into practical applications, because there's a journey or pathway that medical information has to go through before you can benefit from it on a personal basis. And it doesn't happen that we discover something and then you get benefit of it. Now, I will say that does happen with drugs. And that's because Big Pharma really has created the pipeline of how do we create medications and how do we get them to the market as fast as possible. So they bypass that 30-year process and R&D type of pathway that everything else has to go through. But when it comes to natural treatments that there are no patents for, and no big pharmaceutical company is going to get a patent on and make billions of dollars, it's going to take a much longer time for information like this about lifespan to make it to the mainstream, or actually who's going to fund a study on, oh, if women are in hormonal poverty compared to hormonal prosperity, how does their longevity change? Nobody's going to fund that study. It's got to be a ginormous study with many thousands of people to have the power to get the statistical significance that you need. And so a lot of women say, well, how come I didn't hear about these things? Because nobody's paying for you to know about it, because that's not what mainstream medicine is about, which includes big pharma, big medicine, big insurance, and big food. And those are for-profit businesses that want to make things that they can make a profit off of. Well, when it comes to your health, many of the things that you need to do are not for-profit things, and nobody's going to fund the research on that. So you do have some research coming out, like a lot of these actuarial studies, and then they'll do cohort analysis where they look at one group of women who's in hormonal poverty, one group of women who's in hormonal prosperity, and then the differences. But then nobody will use that as a recommendation at your doctor's office for you should do this. But what I want to say is, we've talked about asking empowering questions. You're a smart woman, right? If you're watching this, I just know something about you, and that's that you're very intelligent. And you can look at this group of women who are in hormonal prosperity and see their outcomes. And you can look at this group of women in hormonal poverty and see their outcomes. And then you can go, maybe there's something to be that this is implicating in my health that I could use. And I think I'll get out of hormonal poverty because I want to be with the crew who's living 2 years longer, right? So we use basic knowledge about science and how the body works to fill in the gaps where we don't have information because nobody's going to finance those studies. And then we look at the outcomes that people are getting, and they are far superior. So this might have been a not joyful and a somewhat sobering discussion to have with you. We very much are in denial about death in a lot of industrialized countries. We don't want to talk about it like it's not going to happen, but I'm here to be the reality checker. It's going to happen for each and every one of us at some point. It just is. We were born and we're going to die. And, unfortunately, there was a very sobering experience I had with my in-laws, where looking at the differences between how my two in-laws passed away and their death experience, and how my father, personal father, died and his death experience, my mom's still living, is very sobering and really speaks to the two different ways that we look at this in most industrialized countries. So nobody in my in-laws' family wanted to talk about death, even though it was looking like that was going to happen with each of them at different times in their life. Nobody would have the conversation. Nobody would have the DNR conversation, do not resuscitate, even though they probably were in a position where they did not need to be resuscitated. Nobody would have the conversation. So what happened? They both died in the hospital. Well, let me say my mother-in-law died in the hospital with tubes coming out of every orifice in a very artificial, not peaceful environment. And it was very sad. While my dad died at home in his bed with hospice because everyone had that conversation. And I know this is something you don't want to talk about, but if you don't talk about it, then you're subject to dying like my mother and ex-mother-in-law did in the hospital with tubes coming out of everything, or living 2 years shorter because you didn't address your hormonal poverty. And then if you don't make the choice, is really making a choice, which is a choice not to make a choice, which is making a decision. And then you're opting for the road of hormonal poverty and the three consequences: midlife metabolic mayhem, increased risk of disease, premature death. And I don't want you to be victim to a choice that you could have made that you didn't make. And that's why I'm here, is to say, wake up and make the choice, have the conversation, get real, get out of denial, stop believing you're getting all the information you need at your doctor's office. You're not. And start getting the right information. So we've really gone into the three consequences. This is the most sobering of all of them for sure. And so hopefully you'll be inspired to take action. We're going to dive into more details on the specific symptoms of midlife metabolic mayhem. How are these hormonally related? I know a lot of you are scratching your head going, I just don't see how this gut problem I have is related to my hormones. So don't worry, I got you. We're going to dive into the diseases and how they're related to hormonal poverty. We're going to dive more into the longevity, and we're going to dive more into what is this? And is it me she's talking to? Am I in hormonal poverty? Because I know you're confused right now. And that's okay. You can take my quiz, which helps you to start to identify if you're hormonal poverty. And then I have lots of other resources for you to really get clear on, am I in hormonal poverty? If so, where am I impoverished? And then what do I need to do about it? So stay tuned for more information coming. I'll see you in the next episode. Until then, peace, love, and hormones, y'all.